Just so
Thank you.
y'all know,
Well,
the
you told
recording's
us
in
that.
progress. Okay.
I had
So-
no idea.
So here we are. We're still in Esther. You know, we read a little bit of Esther last week to kind of get an idea of where things were. There is a plot afoot we read a little bit of the apocryphal Greek Esther, which has some special things. Edition A is what we read last week, that's where we get introduced to Mordecai, who is a Jew who was probably brought over along with Daniel. That same transition as a child, he's been indoctrinated in the Babylonian ways, but he's maintained his Jewish identity, and he's a powerful person in the Babylonian kingdom. And he uses that to help his own people. But so that was the introduction to that. And then we get this story of Queen Vashti, who refuses to come to the party that the king is throwing.
Right.
And so the king talks to his advisors. Of course, they're all drunk. They've been drunk for 6 months. And say that, well, we can't let this happen. We can't let these women rule our lives. And so they depose Queen Vashti. And so a call has been put out for a new queen. And don't know what, y'all know where this is going? Okay. If there's a call for a new queen. So share the screen here. Sure. There we go. Okay. Can y'all see that okay? So that's where we're at. I've titled it Queen Esther and Mordecai because some other things happen here. A lot of time passes while they're looking for a queen. Okay, so just bear in mind that this ain't just an immediate thing, and you'll see. We'll talk about how much time has passed here and stuff. So if someone wants to read Esther chapter 2, not the whole chapter, verses 1 through 3. Sorry about the names.
After these things, when the anger of King Ahasuerus had subsided, he remembered Vashti and what she had done and what had been decreed against her. Then the king's attendants who served him said, "Let beautiful young virgins be sought for the king, and let the king appoint overseers in all the provinces of his kingdom, that they may gather every beautiful young virgin to Susa, the capital, to the harem, into the custody of Haggai, the church's eunuch, who was in charge of the women, and let their cosmetics be given them."
Okay, so
I have a question real quick.
Yep.
Right off the bat. Fran, what did you read for the king's name?
Who?
He said, later-
Ahasuerus.
Mine says Xerxes.
the same person.
Same guy. Okay.
One's a Greek name and the other is the Babylonian name.
Oh, I've never heard the Greek name before.
Yeah. Well, Xerxes is the Greek.
That's the way it's taught in history.
Easier to
Xerxes.
say.
So right there at the end, the attendants are proposing, hey, we'll search for a beautiful young maiden to become the new queen. But right there at the end, look who's in charge of the women. One of the
Yeah,
eunuchs.
The eunuchs, well,
Let beauty treatments be given to them. Now they're already beautiful. It says that. Beautiful young virgins, beautiful young women. Why do you think they would need cosmetic treatments, beauty treatments?
I don't know, don't use the stuff.
Because they can't look like a common beautiful woman. They have to be a royal beautiful woman. And odds are they know that some of the most beautiful women are probably the Jews.
Ooh, that ought to check.
So they've got to make them look more Babylonian.
Hey.
Okay, 4 through 6.
Oh, can you do it?
Yeah, I just gotta get to it here. Then let the girl who pleases the king be queen instead of Vashti. This advice appeared to the king and he followed it. Now there was in the citadel of Susa a Jew of the tribe of Benjamin named Mordecai, son of Jair, the son of Shemiel, the son of Kish. How far? 6?
Mhm.
Who had been carried into exile from Jerusalem by Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon. Among those taken captive with Jehoiakim, king of Judah.
So this reiterates what we heard in the additions A earlier, last week. Kind of the same introduction to Mordecai again, tribe of Benjamin. He was carried in when the king Jehoiakim, the last king of Judah, was captured. So this would have been as a child. He would have been captured as a child.
Is that the same person as Jeconiah?
Jeconiah is a Hebrew name. The Jehoiakim is the Babylonian name. Yeah. Okay. 7 and 8.
Mordecai had a cousin named Abishai, whom he had brought up because she had neither father nor mother. This young woman, who was also known as Esther, had a lovely figure and was beautiful. Mordecai had taken her as his own daughter when her father and mother had died. When the king's order and edict had been proclaimed, many young women were brought to the citadel of Susa and put under the care of Haggai. Esther also had taken to the king's palace and entrusted to Haggai, who had charge of the harem.
Okay. So we learn a few interesting facts about Esther. Number one, her Hebrew name was Hadassah or Hadassah.
Yeah.
However you want to pronounce that. Esther is the Greek name. So it's not even Babylonian, it's Greek. So what we have, the story of Esther was written in Greek. Okay? Which means that it was not written until after the exile. Okay? We also learned she was an orphan. She lost both of her parents. And so she's being raised by her cousin, her older cousin, Mordecai. So we assume they're first cousins, but just based on what it says, but they're blood, they're blood. And that was the responsibility of Mordecai, being a prominent male figure of his family. His responsibility was to raise up the young children as his own. So he has done what the Hebrew way is. Okay, so she's taken as one of the young women presented to the king. Verse 9 through 11.
She pleased him and won his immediately. I don't think I can do it. Okay, she pleased him and won his favor. Immediately he provided her with her beauty treatments and special food. He assigned to her 7 female attendants selected from the king's palace and moved her and her attendants into the best place in the harem. Esther had not revealed her nationality and family background because Mordecai had forbidden her to do so. Every day he walked back and forth near the courtyard of the harem to find out how Esther was and what was happening to her.
Okay, so she wins the favor of Haggai. Remember, he's the eunuch. He's the one making the decision for the king right now. So she wins his favor. He provides her with the treatments and with special food. Oh, why do you think that? You gotta look, not only gotta look beautiful, but your body has to too. So anyway,
Probably
and he gets assigned 7 female, or she gets assigned 7 female attendants, and she's moved into the best place in the harem. Now, how do you think that would have felt to those women that were the more prominent ones to begin with?
Well, they didn't.
That all of a sudden they're being
Happy.
displaced, right?
Happy.
Well, nobody knew she was a Jew except for Mordecai, and we're going to find out that that the eunuch also finds out. But we find out about a little more about the eunuch here in a little bit. So, but Mordecai, he walked, being a prominent person, he has access to the palace, a lot of places in the palace. He walked back and forth to find out how she's doing. So he's taking care of her even in his limited capacity. Okay. 12 and 13, I'll read it. So, before a young woman's turn came to go into King Xerxes, so that tells us that there was more than one that found favor with Haggai. He basically compressed the list of women down to just a select few. Okay. So before a young woman's turn came to go into King Xerxes, she had to complete 12 months of beauty treatments prescribed for the women, 6 months with oil of myrrh, and 6 with perfumes and cosmetics. And this is how she would go to the king. Anything she wanted was given to her to take with her from the harem to the king's palace. So they're going through these treatments. Of course, it doesn't mention food here. We presume the same food is given too, but it's going through basically beauty school. I don't know what they used to call it back in the old day, finishing school or whatever. I think the British did it for a little longer, but yeah, she's being trained to be a proper queen. But she's also being treated with myrrh and with perfumes and cosmetics. The first 6 months of myrrh, I'm assuming that would be as a base to her skin, and then the perfume and cosmetics to accent that. But that's just a guess on my part. I'm a guy. And she left. You want to read that? It's one verse, verse 14, Paul.
I'll do that. I'll do that. In the evening, she would go there, and in the morning, return to her part of the harem to the care of
Shashgaz.
the king's eunuch, who was in charge of the concubines. She would not return to the king unless he was pleased with her and summoned her by name.
Okay. So you've got Hegai, who's in charge of the harem, but you've got this other guy, Shashgaz, who is in charge of the concubines. And there's a reason that they're separated. The harem was used to make the king look better. The concubines were used to make the king feel better.
That's a nice way to put it.
Okay. You're okay. Yeah, 15 and 16.
When the time came for Esther, the young woman Mordecai had adopted, the daughter of his uncle Abigail, to go to the king. She asked for nothing other than what Hegai, the king's eunuch, who was in charge of the harem, suggested. And Esther won the favor of everyone who saw her. She was taken to King Xerxes in the royal residence in the 10th month, the month of Tebeth, in the 7th year of his reign.
Okay. So this started out in the first month. So we're in the 10th month. So 10 months, she's gone through the oil bath for 6 months. And so she's 4 months into her cosmetic treatments and things, and she's already winning the favor of not only the king, but of all of his courtiers too. Okay. 18 through 20.
And the king gave a great banquet, Esther's banquet, for all his nobles and officials. He proclaimed a holiday throughout the provinces and distributed gifts with royal liberality. When the virgins were assembled a second time, Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate. But Esther had kept secret her family background and nationality, just as Mordecai had told her to do, for she continued to follow Mordecai's instructions as she had done when he was bringing her up.
Okay. So they met one time, she's found extreme favor. They whittled it down a little more. And so they're assembled a second time. And this time Mordecai happens to be in the area. During the time Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate, Bigthana and Teresh, two of the king's officers who guarded that doorway, became angry and conspired to assassinate King Xerxes. Ooh, that doesn't look good. But Mordecai found out about the plot and told Queen Esther, who in turn reported it to the king, giving credit to Mordecai. Now they're already calling her Queen Esther, but this is because the writer is writing post-exile and has forgotten to proofread his text.
Yeah.
And when the report was investigated and found to be true, the two officials were impaled on poles. All this was recorded in the book of the annals in the presence of the king. Okay. So Mordecai sitting there, here's the two officers, two Babylonian guards conspiring against their own king. So he tells Esther, who is, she's actually being admitted into the king's presence at times. And so during one of those, during the second time, she tells the king about this. They do a quick investigation and find it to be true, and the other summarily executed. On to chapter 3.
Hang on a second, Michael.
Mhm.
Whoever read that said it was impaled.
Yeah,
Impaled
it's
on
not
wood.
what mine
What is it?
says.
Mine says hang.
Hanged.
Now, there's a big difference between impaling and hanging.
Hanged on a gallows, that's what
Yeah.
mine says, yeah.
Well,
Well, they killed him, so what difference does
you
it have?
know, it's interesting that it's a little bit more than just a translation.
Well, you
mistake.
got to remember that Esther was one of those. Greek Esther was found with the Dead Sea Scrolls. And there are some, and there's several translations, the Vulgate, the Septuagint, Septuagint being Greek. There could have been different translators who followed one particular.
Now I'm confused. You said that they found the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Mhm.
They weren't
Greek.
found.
Greek Esther
When were they found?
was part of the scrolls that was found
Well,
in
I thought they weren't found until the
the
1940s.
1940s. Yes.
Or the 20th century. So how they end up in the Bible?
Keep in mind that the translation that you're reading is Esther was found prior to that. They
Oh,
knew about
okay.
Esther, but
Okay.
Greek Esther, I see what you're getting at. Greek Esther was
Oh,
found.
okay.
That's a different person.
A different, it was a total Greek translation with extra stuff.
Oh, so they had the translation, they didn't have the original.
They did, right. Greek.
Okay, and so
Greek
the original
Esther-
was in the Dead Sea Scrolls.
No, the original was known prior to that
Okay.
in the, what they call the writings of the
Uh-huh.
Torah or the Tanakh.
Okay.
But Greek Esther just confirmed that.
Got it. Okay. Learned something.
Okay, so on to chapter 3, verse 1 and 2. Oh, 1 through 3, sorry.
After these events, King Ahasuerus promoted Haman, the son of Hammedatha, and Agagite, and advanced him and established his authority over all the princes who were with him. And all the king's servants who were at the king's gate bowed down and paid homage to Haman, for so the king had commanded concerning him. But Mordecai neither bowed down nor paid homage. Then the king's servants who were at the king's gate said to Mordecai, "Why are you transgressing the king's command?"
Okay, so, basically it transfers to the next series of events. The two guys were killed. Now we're having a celebration. Don't know how long after this, but after these events, this guy named Haman, the son of Hammedatha, who is an Agagite. We don't, what we can infer from this is that he's from a family that was also conquered by the Babylonians, another group of people that were conquered. And he has also risen to a high place. And in fact, he's elevating him higher than that of all the other nobles. So basically second or third in command. Now, Mordecai doesn't kneel to him like the rest of them do. We don't know why that is yet. Okay.
He's not bound down to anybody, huh?
If he's following God, he doesn't bow down to anybody.
Well, but he would have bowed to the king. Otherwise, he wouldn't be in the
Yeah,
position.
that's true. Yeah.
So they ask, why are you not doing this? So 4 through 6.
Day after day, they spoke to him, but he refused to comply. Therefore, they told Hanan about it to see whether Mordecai's behavior would be tolerated, for he had told them he was a Jew. When Hanan saw that Mordecai would not kneel down to pay him honor, he was enraged. Yet having learned who Mordecai's people were, he scorned the idea of killing only Mordecai. Instead, Hanan looked for a way to destroy all Mordecai's people, the Jews, throughout the whole kingdom of Xerxes.
Okay.
Ooh.
So
He was not very
again,
nice.
just like through a lot of the history, it's always the Jews' fault.
Mhm.
I kind of infer from here that it wasn't, Mordecai was not doing this because he was a Jew, he was doing it for personal reasons. But Haman is attributing Mordecai's revolting behavior to the fact that he was a Jew.
Mhm.
So you can take it from that what you will. 7 and 8.
In the 12th year of King Xerxes, in the first month, the month of Nisan, the poor, that is the lot, was cast in the presence of Haman to select a day and a month. And the lot fell on the 12th month, the month of Adar. Then Haman said to King Xerxes, there is a certain people dispersed among the peoples in all the provinces of your kingdom, who keep themselves separate. Their customs are different from those of all other people, and they do not obey the king's laws. It is not the king's best interest to tolerate them.
So you look at the timing here. Queen Esther was made queen in the 10th month of his 10th year. Now we're in the first month of the 12th year. So we're a little over, we're a year and a quarter further along now. But the poor, don't know what that is, but it says the lot. We can assume that it's some kind of divining device, like a die or something like that. The die is cast. It's not unheard of. The Jews had the Urim and Thummim, so that they used to discern what God was telling them, that they couldn't rationalize it. Well, God will tell us through these dice, which the Urim and Thummim have transformed into what we know as the dreidel, which is a toy, but it has different sides on it. So they'd spin it, and whatever it landed on, that was what God must have discerned for us. So
I have a footnote for that.
go ahead.
It says, first of all, first month, 12th year, more than 4 years after Esther had become queen, poor, an Assyrian word meaning lot. The plural Purim gives its name to the feast commemorating the Jews' deliverance from Haman. See introduction under cast the lot in order to determine the most propitious time for carrying out his plot against the Jews.
The Jews would call it Purim
Mhm.
based on this, based on this.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. It says 4 years. I assume that 4 years is when the process started.
Mhm.
Anyway, okay. So right. So the king declares, okay, let's do this. Haman, who now has to determine, I guess they decide when, we're going to do these things to the Jews, but we're going to let Babylonian God or whatever decide how that's. So we're going to, this pure, we're going to cast, and we'll find out when they have till, when it's going to happen. And the die cast says, well, it happened in the 12th month. Well, I tell you, I think that's God at work, because that was the furthest it could go. Because if it had cast on the first month, it would have happened immediately. So now they've got the full length of the year to work
Figure out
with.
what to do. Yeah, okay.
Okay, 12 through, oh, is it my turn or your turn?
You skipped.
You skipped
Skip
some,
some.
yeah.
I went backward.
That's it.
Okay, 9 through 11.
If it pleases the king, let a decree be issued to destroy them. And I will give 10,000 talents of silver to the king's administrators for the royal treasury. So the king took his signet ring from his finger and gave it to Haman, son of Hammedatha, and the Agagite, the enemy of the Jews. Keep the money, the king said to Haman, and do with the people as you please.
Okay. So Haman is held in such high esteem by King Xerxes that King Xerxes says, just do whatever you feel you need to do. Here's my signet ring. Well, that means Haman can do whatever he wants now, as the voice of the king. So Haman can make a decree and use the signet ring to seal it, and not even the king can change it. So, okay. Then on the 13th day of the first month, the royal secretaries were summoned. So, just a few days later, maybe a week later, they wrote out in the script of each province and in the language of each people all Haman's orders to the king's satraps. Those are governors or group leaders, the governors of the various provinces and the nobles of the various peoples. These were written in the name of the king Xerxes himself and sealed with his own ring. So Haman's doing this, but he's acting in as the role of king now, and even writing King Xerxes' name. 13.
Letters were sent by couriers to all the king's provinces to destroy, to kill, and to annihilate all the Jews, both young and old, women and children, in one day, the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month Adar, and to seize their possessions as plunder.
Okay, so on the 12th month, so the letters went out on the 13th day of the first month.
Mhm.
On the 13th day of the 12th month, so 11 months later,
Yeah.
this is when it's going to happen. Prepare yourselves.
Mhm.
Now, we're going to the edition B. This is in the Greek Esther. You don't have it in your Bible.
Okay.
So, and this is the letter, is why I'm putting this in here. Again, this ain't included in our regular canon, but this is supposedly the letter that went out. So if you want to start reading that, verse 1.
I can't see it to read it.
Oh, okay.
This is a copy of the letter. The great king Artaxerxes writes the following to the governors of the 127 provinces from India to Ethiopia, and to the officials under them.
Having become ruler of many nations and master of the whole world, not elated with presumption of authority, but always acting reasonably and with kindness, I have determined to settle the lives of my subjects in lasting tranquility, and in order to make my kingdom peaceable and open to travel throughout all its extent, to restore the peace desired by all people.
Because I love you so much.
I'm
Now
gonna
remember, this
kill
is
you.
Haman. This is Haman's writing this, not King Xerxes, but he's writing under the name of King Xerxes. So yeah, not elated with the presumption of authority. I'm not doing this because I'm king. I'm doing it because I love you.
Mhm.
Don't we
Yes,
hear
again.
that now?
Yes, again,
It hurts me more when I spank you than it hurts you.
Right.
Ugh.
When I asked my counselors how this might be accomplished, okay? Now, when I asked my counselors, Haman, writing as the king, it's going to mention himself in the third person here, okay? Now he's putting blame on it, not on him or the king, but on the counselors. Okay? When I asked my counselors how this might be accomplished, Haman, in the third person, he's talking about himself, who excels among us in sound judgment
all right.
and is distinguished for his unchanging goodwill and steadfast fidelity, and has attained the second place in the kingdom. Now we find out just how high he is. Pointed out to us that among all the nations in the world, there is scattered a certain hostile people who have laws contrary to those of every nation, not just us, but every nation,
Okay.
and continually disregard the ordinance of kings, so that the unifying of the kingdom that we honorably intend cannot be brought about.
I know who those people were. Anybody who disagreed with him.
Go ahead, verse 5.
We understand that this people, and it alone, stands constantly in opposition to every nation, perversely following a strange manner of life and laws, and is ill disposed to our government, doing all the harm they can so that our kingdom may not attain stabilities.
Doing all the harm. Now they've done nothing. They live in peace in the Babylonian, under Babylonian rule.
Depends
Okay,
who you ask.
right. You want to get that?
Therefore, we have decreed that those indicated to you in the letters written by Haman, who is in charge of affairs and is our second father, shall all wives and children included be utterly destroyed by the swords of their enemies, without pity or restraint, on the 14th day of the 12th month, Adar of this present year, so that those who have long been hostile and remain so may in a single day go down in violence to Hades and leave our government completely secure and untroubled hereafter.
Now, it's interesting that the Greek text would have the 14th day, not the 13th day.
Okay.
But nevertheless, We can tell that this is Greek too, because it uses the term Hades, which was the Greek god of the underworld. So, okay. Wanna take that? 14?
A copy of the text of the edict was to be issued as law in every province and made known to the people of every nationality, so they would be ready for that day. The couriers went out, spurred on by the king's command, and the edict was issued in the citadel of Susa. The king and Haman sat down to drink, but the city of Susa was bewildered.
Okay. So the edict goes out, and the people who live in the capital city are like, what the heck are they talking about?
Why is he gonna
This
kill
don't make
us?
any sense. So now we're back into the Bible, chapter 4 of Esther. I'll get this.
Oh, okay.
When Mordecai learned of all that had been done, he tore his clothes, put on sackcloth and ashes, and went out into the city, wailing loudly and bitterly. But he went only as far as the king's gate, because no one clothed in sackcloth was allowed to enter it. In every province to which the edict and order of the king came, there was great mourning among the Jews, with fasting, weeping, and wailing. Many lay in sackcloth and ashes. And so that would be the tradition that continues on in the Feast of Purim,
Mhm.
or the Festival of Purim.
Yeah.
Okay, if you want to get that. Verse
Me?
4,
Okay.
4 through
My
6.
turn now?
No, me.
Okay,
When Esther's maidens and her eunuchs came and told her, and the queen writhed in great anguish, and she sent garments to clothe Mordecai that he might remove his sackcloth from him, but he did not accept them. Through 6. Then Esther summoned Hathish from the king's eunuchs, whom the king had appointed to attend her, and ordered him to go to Mordecai to learn what this was and why it was. So Hathish went out to Mordecai to the city square in front of the king's gate.
Okay. So Esther hears what's happening. Mordecai, he's not coming around again. You know, she hasn't probably seen him in a few days, and she's worried. So sends out word with one of her attendants, hey, go find out what's going on. And this is how she finds out. So she sends clothes out to him, and he don't want
He
them
refuses.
because he's that passionate about what's going on. And so Hathach is now going to talk to Mordecai. So you got it? 7 and 8.
okay. Mordecai told him everything that had happened to him, including the exact amount of money Haman had promised to pay into the royal treasury for the destruction of the Jews.
Stop right there. How much money was that? Do y'all remember?
No.
10,000 pieces of silver.
Oh,
Okay. Okay, go ahead.
That's a lot of money.
Mhm.
He also gave him a copy of the text to the edict of their annihilation, which had been published in Susa, to show to Esther and explain it to her. And he told him to urge her to go into the king's presence today for mercy and plead with him for the people.
Okay. We learn a little bit more about Esther now.
So we know
and
she's
Mordecai.
a Jew now. We know she's a
Well,
Jew.
right. Mordecai has told him everything that's happened. And so Mordecai has entrusted to Hathach, the eunuch, who he is, who Esther is, and he gives him a copy of the text of the edict for him to take to Esther. Now, what does that tell us about Esther now?
Now she's got a
She knows how to
story
read. The
Okay,
Which is
Babylonians,
rare.
okay.
they've taught her how to read. And so he asked her, hey, go talk to the king and plead for mercy for the Jews. So 9 through 11.
I
What
think,
happened?
Did I
I thought
skip something?
I thought we did 9.
No, we didn't do that. Go ahead.
Okay, well, who, me? Again?
No,
Your turn.
it's Luke's
Yeah.
turn. Luke.
Hathach went back and reported to Esther what Mordecai had said. Then she instructed him to say to Mordecai, all the king's officials and the people of the royal provinces know that for any man or woman who approaches the king in the inner court without being summoned, the king has but one law, that they be put to death unless the king extends the gold scepter to them and spares their lives. But 30 days have passed since I was called to go to the king.
Okay, so she sends a message back to Mordecai through Hathach saying, I can't just go into the king's presence. I've got to be called for. Keep in mind, this is 4 years after Queen Vashti was deposed
Right.
because she would not do what, she wouldn't follow the
Wouldn't do
law.
What the king wanted, yeah.
And so she knows what happens. Women are to be, women are told what to do here. They just don't act on their own.
Mhm.
So 12 through 14. You can do that, Wendy.
Wendy, you want to try?
When Esther's words were reported to Mordecai, he sent back this answer. Do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place. But you and your father's family will perish. And who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this.
Okay. Again, we're learning a lot about the Jews during this time frame. Mordecai basically sends back Queen Esther. Yeah, don't think you're above the rest of us. You're a Jew too. And when the king finds out that you are, you're going to die. As for the rest of us, I trust God that we're going to be delivered, but you're definitely going to be killed. And me too, because I'm part of your family. So I will say that this particular thing is a very powerful message for me personally as a standard of faith for Mordecai of all people. But this, for such a time as this, is the motto of Lexington Theological Seminary.
Oh.
For such a time.
For such a time as this.
All right.
So Esther, 15 through 17.
Then Esther sent this reply to Mordecai. Go gather together all the Jews who are in Susa and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my attendants will fast as you do. When this is done, I will go to the king, even though it is against the law. And if I perish, I perish. So Mordecai went away and carried out all of Esther's instructions.
Okay, so Esther, briefly realizing what Mordecai's words actually mean, that I'm going to die. I'm definitely going to die if I don't do something. But if I do something, the possibility exists that I could survive.
Yeah.
But so I'll take the way out that possibly leaves me alive. But for the record, give me 3 days to. And probably she's trying to plan this out. What am I going to say? How am I going to present it? But she's going to be fasting as well as all of them. And of course, Mordecai, in the position he's in, he can call the people together. He has that power. So he does what she tells him to do. Now we're seeing a reversal of things that are going on. So a woman telling a man what needs to be done. Okay. Now we're back in the Apocrypha again. This is edition C. We're almost done. So whose turn is it?
Yours.
Mine. Okay. So edition C. Then Mordecai prayed to the Lord, calling to remembrance all the works of the Lord. He said, O Lord, Lord, you rule as king over all things, for the universe is in your power, and there is no one who can oppose you when it is your will to save Israel. For you have made heaven and earth and every wonderful thing under heaven. You are Lord of all, and there is no one who can resist you, the Lord. Okay. 12 through 14. Now keep in mind, these Greek editions here, we're going to see the name of God. In the book of Esther, the name of God never shows up in the whole book. So only in these editions does that happen. Okay, 12 through 14.
You know all things. You know, O Lord, that it was not in insolence or pride or for any love of glory that I did this and refused to bow down to this proud Haman. For I would have been willing to kiss the soles of his feet to save Israel. But I did this so that I might not set human glory above the glory of God. And I will not bow down to anyone but you, who are my Lord, and I will not do these things in pride.
Okay. So in this edition, we find out what his motivation was for not doing it. It was kind of personal, but it was he knew Haman. Remember, Haman was one of the nobles. He knew Haman's purpose. And he was not about to bow down and suck up to a guy who had already placed himself above God,
Mhm.
which meant he also placed himself above the king. And we've already seen that through the edict that went out, that Haman acting as king, he's manipulative. So that is why Mordecai refused to bow down. He said he would have done it in order to save the Jews. He would have done it, period. But for personal reasons, he didn't do it because he knew what this guy would do and how and why he would do it. And he wasn't about to enable that. 15 through 17.
And now, O Lord God and King, God of Abraham, spare your people, for the eyes of our foes are upon us to annihilate us, and they desire to destroy the inheritance that has been yours from the beginning. Do not neglect your portion, which you redeemed for yourself out of the land of Egypt. Hear my prayer and have mercy upon your inheritance. Turn our mourning into feasting, that we may live and sing praise to your name. O Lord, do not destroy the lips of those who praise you.
This is a message that we typically get from a prophet telling the people, don't forget where you came from, that God brought you out of the land of Egypt. This is one of the only instances where a human is telling God, don't forget where you brought us out from, God. You are the one who brought us out of Egypt. So I'm telling you, Mordecai should be lifted up as one of the most faithful. And
Not
he's
really.
kind of forgotten. He's kind of forgotten.
Yeah.
And then verse 18.
And all Israel cried out mightily, for their death was before their eyes.
Okay. So we're probably nearing the end of that, we're probably nearing the 12th month by this point. So the next time we meet, Esther and Mordecai's plan is put into action. So we'll be, if we didn't finish 4, we'll be at the end of 4, and then going into 5 and probably 6 next week, unless there's additions there. I got to look at my notes. Thank you all for being here.
All right, Mike, thank you, sir.
So busy as it's been around here.
So stay tuned for the sequel.
I'm bringing the car around back.
Oh, dang it. I didn't see that.
What?
Lanny tried to kick in and I didn't, because we were on a different
Oh, my
screen. I
goodness.
didn't see it.
Okay.
So let's see if he
Well,
pops on.
I'm sure
real
he'll
quick.
forgive you.
Tell him it was a secret meeting and he.
Yeah.
Well, I assume it was Lanny because it says Pam's iPad. She's right here.
That's it. That's it.
So tell him we won't be here tomorrow.
Tell him I'm sorry.
That's okay. You can, I'll talk him.
Yeah.
I know he had something to tell you.